Pubs, disco, and fighting Nazis. How Leeds nurtured British post-punk music. The Guardian. Against the backdrop of the Yorkshire Ripper and fascist thugs, bands in late 70s, Leeds started creating the most dynamic DIY music in the UKU, and all from a single pub. Against the backdrop of the Yorkshire Ripper and fascist thugs, bands in late 70s, Leeds started creating the most dynamic DIY music in the UKU, and all from a single pub. In the late 1970s, a small group of art students at Leeds University created a pivotal hotbed of radical post-punk. Jerky punky, funky music would influence bands as diverse as the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Massive Attack. Together with the Jagged, some nights I'd watch Gang of Four and think, I am watching the best band in the world. Original Meccans guitarist Kevin Lycett remembers over a green tea in the pub where the scene once congregated. And they're my mate. Leeds already had a counter-cultural underground in the 70s, including housing co-ops, the alternative and radical tutors in both colleges' art departments, one of whom, the University of Leeds professor Tim Clark, had been in the European Revolutionary Alliance. Punk provided the trigger to put this into music. After Gang of Four, meanwhile, most of the future Meccans saw the Sex Pistols at Polytechnic. They were fucking off. DIY came through necessity. GO4 initial. You didn't need to be a trained musician to make music. There was suspicion and derision if you were. It was an amazing time for anyone to step up and express themselves, remembers R.O.S. Allen, who was initially in the Meccans and then formed Delta 5. Fanzines. For Meccans guitarist John Langford, London punk was business-oriented, major label and about being outrageous. But in the North we did. The environment fed the music. Gil borrowed a type. The Leeds scene rejected the male-dominated ethos of the era, with the bands featuring a mix of men and women in their lineups. Lycett believes that there was an acceptance of difference, says Allen. I'd come from a pivotal local promoter, who is still promoting today, gave all the bands their chance, and a support slot with the Reeselos led to the Meccans being spotted by the new Edinburgh indie label Fast Product. The band's debut, Rough Trade, refused to stock it because we were too primitive, Langford says. Too primitive for today, with its wood and tiles and punk soundtrack, the pub hub close to campus is almost as it was. Gil observes that today's city center, with its swish shopping centers and homogeneous chains, is unrecognizable. When Gil looks at old skinheads populated several city center pubs, including the Scarborough Taps, today a salubrious gastropub. Allen witnessed one night the Fenton was attacked. I think they thought the community felt emboldened by the emergence of the city's Rock Against Racism group, which put gigs on in the now demolished Roots Club in Chapeltown, uniting black and white, punk and reggae. RAR was enormous. For Greenhalgh, the 1981 Indiana Potter Newton Park, headlined by the Specials when Ghost Town was at #1, was a pivotal moment, a cultural mix of the West Indian community, Asians, left and locals. Langford remembers, by then, the Ripper had been caught and the scene was changing, with newer bands such as the Proto-Goth Sisters of Mercy or The Vibrant, whose guitarist turned Leeds College of Music tutor Jess Pritchard recalls wanting to be more colorful, less serious than Gang of Four. They inspired us. Today, the guitarist is the only original member in Gang of Four and Lycett is the only ex-Meccan left in Leeds. But both bands have the DIY ethos is very obvious here, says Sarah Statham, who arrived from Manchester, played guitar in, runs the label/gigs community Bomb the Twist and currently plays in End. You can hire the Leeds is a small city but big enough to have lots of cultural connections, so the underground functions really well, says the former Chumbawamba singer turned scriptwriter who herself was hugely influenced by the Meccans and GO4. Today, someone attacked us there one night with a dustbin, says Langford. I much prefer through Gil Music Limited on April 19th. Is out now through Before You Post. We'd like to thank you for joining the debate. We're glad you've chosen to participate and we value your opinions and experiences. Please choose your username under which you would like all your comments to show up. You can only set, please keep your posts respectful and abide by the and if you spot a comment you think doesn't adhere to the guidelines, please use the report link next to it to let us know. Please preview your comment below and click post when you're happy with it.
Raindrop, drop top, top smoking, no cooking the hot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that.